All right, great. So everybody talks about the virtual practice, virtual staffing, virtual expansion, and we are one of the companies who actually implements what everybody talks about going virtual. A little bit of a background about myself. I came to this country when I was 13 years old. I went to high school in Louisiana. I graduated when I was 14, and I got enrolled into engineering school in California. I graduated when I was 17. And then I got recruited to Silicon Valley, which I worked with plenty of high-tech companies. And this is where I'd actually learned scalability. Because in some of these companies, like Sun Macrosystem that I was in with 8 years, we started out with 200 people by the time I started, which in the high-tech area, that means a startup. And when I left, we were 14,000 people. And that's how you learn to scale and go national and then international. So, and then coming back to Los Angeles for about 20 years, I started several software companies and so forth. And the way I got actually into the field of law is one of my friends who got into trouble by basically blowing a statue for one of his cases. And I went in there sort of a consultant trying to help out, and then one thing led to another. I became a COO of that practice, which was a PI practice with a few thousand cases. So as a CEO, I didn't want to spend every day going to the office doing this. I sort of done my thing, and it wasn't so interesting to go into the office every single day. And everything I got asked for is like, Hamid, how do we do this? How do we hire these people? How do we set these processes? And it was continuous demand on staffing up, putting technologies in place, creating processes and procedures. And I was doing it great. We cut the expenses about 30%. We increased the revenue about 35% in the first year. And I started getting calls. You know how this industry is. You've done something, and then it gets around, then you get a bunch of calls, and people say, I'm having what he's having. They don't even know exactly what it is that he's having. But it works, and it gets around. So I started doing this for several different law firms. And I became one of the first virtual COOs because I didn't want to go to all these places. And I started doing this whole service as a virtual COO, which is basically creates things, organizes things, expands things. And after a while, when the demand was so much, instead of saying that, okay, we need to hire a bunch of people that were rare to get, especially case managers and intake staff and so forth, I became a virtual COO, so I started looking at the virtual staffing, which was much easier to get, less expensive, and very easy to scale. So we started it by intake. So let me show you. So with the several departments being in the firm, we started with a legal team, which is something that you cannot quite do virtual. You know, having your attorneys, having your paralegals and associates within the firm, those are pretty much set, especially when you're licensed in the state that you need to practice. Then it came to the other teams where we could definitely use virtual staffing. Now, operations takes intake, document collection, IT support, call answering, client advocacy, which I speak about. It was the same where we recruit, screen, and train intake specialists, for example, for a specific practice type. So if they are doing PI or employment or immigration, we had a system set up in 6 different countries, which we have local teams who basically recruit, screen, train, and then they present to the firm as an intake specialist that they can hire on the fixed cost. So the 3 different levels of being able to go virtual, which is extremely scalable. I had a firm going in 1 year from 2 virtual staff intake to 36 staff, which is incredible. But they were able to scale it because once they found what works and how it works, the virtual staff continuously train each other and it scales up. Now, one of the great things about the virtual staffing in those areas, these people are very happy to do this work. It's a repetitive work that we can't get local staff to do. They don't complain. They show up to work every day. They're happy to have that job. So it makes it very scalable, especially when you can do bilinguals or English speaking and so forth. So we started with the intake staff, and we increased that. Then the next level was people who actually do document retrievals. Again, another repetitive work that case managers don't like to do, attorneys should definitely not do, and it's something that is every firm needs and needs to be scaled up. So we train people to actually be a full-time staff of the firm, so they integrate into your firm. It's not like a call center or answering service, nothing like that. They are your staff. They use your email, they're within your group, and they're scalable. The next thing was another very large PI firm who had about 65 case managers. You can imagine it's like almost up to 8,000 active cases in the PI. And they could not staff enough case managers, especially bilingual. So we started supplying them with case manager assistants. The case managers are certainly good about some things, and they don't want to do a whole bunch of other things. And those whole bucket of whole bunch of other things can go to a very low-cost virtual staff that they can do. So the case managers can actually spend their time building up the case and paying attention to the client instead of trying to do appointment settings or verifying treatments and things like that. So they were, instead of scaling up the case managers, they started staffing up case manager assistants that are virtual. So these are some of the basic examples of how you can expand your intake and operations by using virtual staff. Another very good example was that on the firms that are running anywhere from 500 cases and up, there's always a client satisfaction issue that they need to deal with, and it's usually poor. We did a survey of about 3,000 PI clients, and we found out that 65% of the complaints had to do about not knowing the case status. So these are the people who thought they were ignored, forgotten about, and so forth, which increased the sub-outs, the drops, and bad reviews. So we hired a virtual staff. Again, this is like $10 an hour virtual staff, whose their pure job is to contact every active client and just asking them how they're doing about the case and how dissatisfied are they with the firm. 65% of them was basically unhappy, which also might cause bad reviews and so forth, and reduces the referrals to the firm. So this person calls everybody, finds out their status, escalates the problems, and makes sure that the client becomes satisfied. Now, it does two things. One, increases your client satisfaction, and increases the number of referrals that you get from that effort that you put to actually give them a status. All they need to know is that you still know that they exist and the case exists, really, because sometimes they got forgotten for 6 months. The other item that really appears within the system is that once you collect all the unhappy comments, you also know where the problems are within the firm. It's like there is that staff, being a case manager or attorney or paralegal, is the one that is causing majority of the complaints. So it's also a quality control on the staff. The cost is less, the efficiency and productivity is more, and you get much better referrals than you will do otherwise. And I did some basic comparison of the cost. The cost saving is significant, especially when you're scaling up. And when you're paying the fixed cost, which is anywhere from $1,800 to $2,000 a month that will cost you in the fixed cost, you're saving on taxes, on insurance, on benefits. All of those items are basically non-existent when you're doing a virtual staffing. Now, comes in the marketing. Again, as an active COO, the big issue was I was getting asked question, do you know somebody who actually can do SEO, can do a website? Do you know anybody who can do Facebook ads? Do you know somebody who can do a LinkedIn ad or a Yelp ad or whatever? All of these requests, which is you're continuously sourcing local services to be able to meet all the requirements of your marketing and social media. Again, something that a lot of firms cannot afford to have 10, 12, 15 different people doing this. And if you outsource it locally, it's expensive. So we decided to create a fixed cost marketing for the law firm, which is essentially the list what you see is the list where all of those services gets provided, sending out newsletters. Everybody wants it. Not many people do it because of resources. Doing a very good press release when you have a good verdict or you have a good settlement, you get some publicity out of that. Getting your attorneys listed in over 100 different directory listings for attorneys. I'm sure everybody here has thought about all of this, wanted to do it, they never got to do it, or they didn't have the resources to do it. We made, again, this thing is a fixed cost fee that you get entire list done by somebody who has expertise in that practice area. So now on the business development side, this is another part that everybody thinks about, but they don't make the time to actually do something about it. Lead generation, as Mike mentioned, there is like a lot of lead generation companies. There is like, I don't know, we deal about hundreds of them. Some of them are good, some of them not so good. A lot of them were good, but not good anymore. So it's a very tremendous, tedious effort and a very financial consuming process to identify those good lead generation companies. So we have teams that are dedicated to continuously get those 40 emails that it was mentioned that you come to your email box that says we do leads and we do cases and so forth. We have a team who has expertise with that. Again, it's all virtual. Evaluate their performance, evaluate their references, make sure that you're actually getting money on your, back on your investment. We track everything. We track the number of leads comes in, the number of leads that get contacted, what's your conversion rate. And we pretty much know the cost of client acquisition in every state because we have clients in those states. So we know, for example, in Georgia, the cost of client acquisition for PI is about $1,200, where in California is about $3,400. So we monitor that and make sure that we set you up or connect you to the lead generation company who is performing in those levels. And we do the monitoring. You get the entire report weekly, just like Mike was saying. We monitor a lot of data about everything. Even on the VAs that I talked about, we monitor their time spent on the computer. We capture their screen every 15 minutes. We make sure that they are performing, attending, and everything. It's all about data. The intake, we know exactly how many calls they make, how many people they connect to, how many people they convert to cases. Every piece of data is tracked because it needs to be scalable. So if you don't know your numbers exactly, you can't scale. So that's the lead generation part. A lot of the firms also do not put enough time on the client retention. Some of you guys have a huge database of old leads, old clients, existing clients, and you always wish that you were able to connect with them, get them to refer clients and so forth. Tedious, automated process. We have an entire system that basically takes your database, it continuously connects to those folks and gives them news about your firm. And you add a new staff, new locations, you have a new win. Everything that you do, it gets continuously communicated to your database. A few other things. Review collection. Now is a big thing. Every firm needs to have Google reviews so they can Google my business and so forth. Everybody knows that needs to be done and it should be done, but nobody gets to do it. So we have a specific review collection group that they're contacting your clients who you just settled and get them to do a review on the Google, and we sometimes offer them, gifts or incentives to do that within the law, because we all know we cannot buy reviews and so forth, but there are ways around that. Referral networks, building a referral network. This was very interesting when I was working with a firm that 80% of their cases came from referral networks. The way I use it, not being an attorney, it was like somebody who sends you a nice Rolex watch every year on your birthday. And You don't just pick up the phone and say, thanks, John, for the watch. You do a lot more than that, because this person continuously sending you that gift every single year. When the attorneys build the referral networks and they get those referrals, they don't really appreciate it the way they should. Some of them is more than just a watch. They get a house. And they still treat it as, hey, John, thank you. So what we do help, we collect the referral network. We continuously have a program to connect to these folks and appreciate their contribution to the practice. And we also have a list of the attorneys in every state, which we help the firms reach out to the firms that they were not part of the referral network and build that relationship and setting up appointment for the attorney to introduce themselves to these new firms that could be a great referral source. So again, all of this little task of marketing, outreach, relationship building, everybody wants to do it. Everybody knows some of it works for some of the firms, but nobody gets the time, resources, or staff to actually dedicate to do this. And whenever you go to one of your operational person, marketing, lead generation, whatever, you're telling them to do this, and they say, so, okay, you want me to stop doing that? Because that's what I was doing. This is how this concentrated effort with the separate teams can actually deliver the results. So the virtual benefit that we talked about, highly scalable. The firm that I told you that has a 36 virtual staff, they did it in 1 year, which was amazing. It's gotten to the point where he calls the office and says, I need 3 more by Monday. It's like ordering a pizza with extra cheese on it or something. It's like, Daniel calling, he wants 3 more intake by Monday. And everybody scrambles around, how do we do this on Monday? Because we do a couple of weeks of onboarding and training, and we certify our intake folks to make sure they have high-speed internet, they have Outlook experience. We even have people who are getting trained on FileVine and CasePeer and Clio to be able to certify them, so when they come to the firm, they're preset to actually start working. So convenience staffing, fixed cost, no long-term contract whatsoever, not worried about keeping the bad apples like it happens in a lot of firms, that you have some people that you're just like, I don't know how to actually terminate them or lay them off, or if I do, how am I going to replace them? Basically, with 1 week notice, we can terminate and we can replace, and we do replace continuously. No insurance, no workers' comp, no other insurances in effect. Everything is a fixed cost. And some of the firms, when they're using this virtual staff for medical records or lien reductions or demands, they actually make it a case cost. So it's a pass-through cost for them. And they basically just put it on the case cost based on the number of records retrieved or the demand that was written, so they all do that. So some of the basic, savings that I did on this for some of the average firms that we work with, because we work with about 250 law firms nationwide. We add about 60 to 80 virtual legal staffs a month to the pool, and is expanding like that. Okay, so that's the presentation about the virtual staffing. Just a couple of more items where virtual staffing comes in play. Some of the firms that actually want to expand out of the state, we open up new law firms for the people who actually want. There's a big exodus from California going east. So most of the PI firms in there that are well established are looking to expand out of the state. Usually going to Texas, Georgia, Arizona. Those are some of the destination states that they're going into to set up a whole practice area within those states. So we have a turnkey solution for them. Again, everything happens virtually. We select the city, we set up a whole practice, we staff it up, everything from a physical location to getting it, any local staffing, virtual staffing, lead generation, software implementation, all the IT, and we give them basically a turnkey operation. It's almost like a franchise model where somebody wants to set up a a Burger King in a specific location, and they just put it in. And within 90 days, we actually open a practice in any location. And we staff it up, we have the leads coming in, we set up the intake process and the whole thing. So part of that virtual staffing has gone as far as either opening up a new practice or going out of the state. And we work with a lot of UBE attorneys. For those of you who haven't worked with them, it's a universal bar exam, where it enables the attorney to basically practice in 35 states. And by just they need to file an application, they don't have to take the bar or anything like that. So by utilizing the UBE attorneys, which we have a pretty comprehensive list of UBE attorneys nationwide, we deploy the UBE attorneys to be able to practice the same firm in 5, 10 different states. I want to open it to questions, and I'm sure I talk a lot about the virtual, so let's get some real questions. Anybody had a question about how this gets set up or gets implemented? How does it get set up and how does it get implemented? I'm sorry? I said, how does it get set up and how does it get implemented? Okay, the setup is actually simple. You basically contact us and you give us your requirement. We pretty much know the process of the requirements of intake process or document retrievals or case management. And basically, on that point on, when we get that, we schedule 5 to 10 interviews, which is a Zoom interviews, for the firm that they will evaluate. They actually talk to the candidate. They see their experience and portfolio. And once they select a candidate, we do about 2 weeks of training and onboarding, and then they start. And as I mentioned, it just continuously goes like that until all the positions are staffed. Go ahead. Yes.
I have the mic up. Pass it over when I'm done. So I've started using virtual assistants about maybe a year and a half ago, and we went from 0 to 50. So by the way, guys, this works. Definitely get in touch with them. It's amazing. My question is very specific. I haven't used them yet to communicate with clients via phone or basically anything where they have to pick up a phone and make a call into the U.S. What do you use in order to just like the phone system?
Sure.
For them?
Great question. We absolutely enable them to operate just like they were in the office. So there is a communication system. For those of you, for example, using Greek Central is one of the methods where we set up so they can actually take a call, have the incoming call, outbound calls, and even texting. Voice over IP systems work. We have a variety of different, so we make it fit to the firm and their existing technology. If they don't have one, we introduce them to the one. But they have to be fully integrated into the firm. So they have no limitation as far as emailing, calling, texting, and we're implementing a new feature, which a lot of our clients ask for. It says, I wish they could also print and mail my stuff. And like engagement letter, drop letters, and things like that. So now we're implementing a system where they can actually request something to be printed, mailed out, and they get a verification of the mail out and a tracking number. So even your virtual staff being in Ecuador, we have an Ecuador office, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Philippines, they can actually print and mail letters in behalf of your firm. So we have figured out the whole communication system for that. Was another question?
What indicators do firms use to determine if the VAs are successful for their firm?
Great. We have, actually, in the company itself, we have like 10 performance managers, which each assign a group of firms that they manage the performance of the VAs. The way they do that, all the VAs are required to do end-of-the-day reports for the attorneys, for the firm. Even if you don't read it, it's a great thing to have because it's a point of accountability. People are actually writing down what they have. So we have end-of-the-day reports, and they have metrics, like they're in the intake, they need to make 60 to 80 outbound calls, okay? Or if they're answering the calls. By the way, this is when you're actually taking the inbound calls, it reduces your call center cost. For those of you who have the call center cost that goes by the minute, which basically they have an incentive to drag out the conversations because they're charging you by the minute. We have the VAs being the first line of answering the calls that even comes to the firm itself. And if they're not available, then it jumps into the call center. In some of the firms, the cost of the call center was reduced by 85% because they're only in backup. And another good thing about the VAs, they are 24/7. So for those firms who need 24/7 answering service, they basically, you dictate the time that the VA works for 8 hours. So if you want to have a 24/7, it's basically a combination of 4 to 5 staff. Now you got 24/7 dedicated, trained by us and trained by you, intake staff who are bilingual. This will increase your conversion rate of any lead system you have. Because now somebody who you know who they are, what script they use, is not around about different people answering the calls. They will retain your clients. And our VAs are set up to send the retainers out electronically, use a DocuSign to get it back, and they get actually bonus from the firms when they have a retained client. So they are incentivized for you to retain new clients. Yes? Great question. About 40% of our clients are solo practitioners who are starting out. That's the best solution for them to start out. Because when they're starting out, and all of you guys have started at some point, the expense of having an office, having a full-time assistant that you don't have much work for in the beginning, doing the intake, doing the case management, and so forth. So there is no minimum. Usually those new startup solo practitioners, this is a great target for them to get started and staff up without making long-term employment commitment, expenses, setting up a payroll. You basically get an invoice, twice a month, just like a payroll from us, and you pay it. And there is no, as mentioned, no long-term contracts. So with 1 week notice, you have no obligation to that contract. So to answer your question, any size firm can use it. The small ones to just get started out, the solo practitioner, and the large practices to be able to scale up.
We have a virtual question, a question virtually. Where are the VA staff concentrated? Philippines, which other countries?
I think we have roughly about 35-40% in Philippines that are English speaking. And some of those, by the way, are law school graduates or law school students that are working. So they bring in some law experience with them, even though it's not a US base, but they have good writing skills and reading skills and such. But when you go to South America, we do that because of the being bilingual. So Ecuador and Colombia are probably about another 35-40% of our VA population. By the way, one of the things about, when they mention about hiring a VA, say go to the Upwork, find one, whatever, and after 2 or 3 months, they get another position with 50 cents more or something, and they jump. With our VA system, they get raises 3 months, 6 months. We provide them health benefits. We actually do their paid vacations for them. We do. And they get a lot of incentives to stay and grow and not leave. So this has always been one of the big challenges about keeping virtual staff around long term. So they stay with your firm pretty much with the same range as you have your average staff within the office. Go ahead. Yes.
Are we able to have the VAs through you to be able to have that program as well to determine
absolutely.
Productivity?
Yes, absolutely. Any of those time tracking and performance tracking softwares can be implemented. We use Hubstaff, which is very similar. It tracks their time and their breaks and so forth. We even have something really cool. If you ever come online and get a demonstration of our solution, we have these virtual rooms built up where it resembles your entire office environment. So it has intake office, attorney's office, document retrieval office virtually. It looks like it's pretty cool. And you see people in there working, and you can walk into a room that you have 5 intake staff, and you can talk to all of them simultaneously. Like, hey guys, you guys doing amazing, like you would do in the office. And they hear you, you can see them. And then when they take a break to go to the kitchen, you actually see them walking from their room, going for the break in the kitchen, and when they come back. We have firms that have monitors on the screen that they are monitoring 20, 30 different VAs spread out in different rooms within the screen. And they can monitor how everybody is doing. And we record their screen every 15 minutes. So you can review those. We even record their calls. So if you even want to do an audit on their calls and see how they're responding to the call, how do they making the outbound or answering the inbound, you can hear the recordings. It's pretty sophisticated technologies implemented sort of seamlessly to be able to not miss your staff around you. You actually have more exposure to them than you would have into your local staff because you're tracking, everything. Anybody else?
Layodingbo at Odu Law Firm. I'm over here.
Ah.
We had a chance to talk outside. One of the questions I did not get to ask is, you mentioned lead generation for solo practitioners, and I'm just wondering where that would start in terms of entering that relationship. Obviously, you need to be paid, but just kind of investing into that firm's lead generation. What's the first kind of step that you're doing to generate more clients for that firm?
Thank you. So on the lead generation, we have a team that focuses only on lead generation, and lead management is a two things separate, because lead generation is kind of easy. You sign up a company, you give them a bunch of money, and you sort of wish for the best. And a lot of time that doesn't come true. So what we do, this group, as I mentioned, is constantly looking for new lead sources who have success that we can verify. So we call the firm and ask them, this guy has actually been producing for you at this cost of client acquisition or at this rate and so forth. So by contacting us, we first identify, what type of a leads you're looking for, what is your practice area, which state or city your practice is at. Then we identify 3 lead sources for you to connect and talk to. We put you in contact with them directly because we do not want to be in the middle of the transaction per se. We are basically selecting and then we are managing it for you. So once you select to work with them, we also make a recommendation. Some of these lead generations come in and say, look, my minimum is $25,000 a month or $15,000 a month, something like that. We make a recommendation. We said, usually it says don't give them that much. You give them half of that, let's monitor it for a couple of weeks, see if they produce. If they produce, sell your house and give it to them, because it pays back, especially if you're hitting the cost of client acquisitions targets for that practice or that leads area. So we manage it and you get the reports weekly. Again, we are a third party, we're just monitoring it for your purposes. And usually we recommend to have 3 different lead sources. So if you have, let's say, $25,000 monthly budget, we say divide it up like this between the 3 of them. So you're more diversified. You're not doing $25,000 to one lead source that disappoints you. And then what happens there is like, forget it, this doesn't work, lead generation doesn't work. I'm just going to go do something else. And we also tell you how many months you need to be working with that lead source, because some of them take a little bit for them to ramp up. And some of them, they have good weeks, bad weeks. So you have to be able to sustain yourself within that period of time. And for those people, by the way, say lead sources doesn't work, every single large law firms that I work with, they built their firm around lead sources. It wasn't just from referrals, it wasn't from word of mouth, it was buying leads from lead companies. But they were careful about it. They didn't just throw money at it and then expecting it to happen. It's like sometimes I'm talking to the firms where they say, I invested $30,000 with this lead source and I only got 3 cases. And then I examine the process that they have. They expect just because they paid $30,000, cases just going to fall in their laps. It doesn't work like that. They need to have the infrastructure in place to convert that lead into a case, and they don't realize that. Okay, so if you're spending $30,000 a month on the lead source, you need to have a good 24/7 intake. So when that lead comes in, 11 a.m. or 11 p.m., somebody is answering it. And somebody is there to retain it. You can't just because you pay the lead source means the cases just comes and happens. It doesn't work like that. And then if you're buying leads from those sources where they send you the lead through text or emails, at the very best, you're able to connect to 40% of those on the first day, first 2 days. What happens to the other 60% of the leads that you paid for? Somebody needs to be on top of that with a continuous sequence, text messages, emails, and calls. And we create those sequence of emails and text, which is designed for a different type of case types, that it goes out automatically. So when somebody lead comes in, 3 seconds later, a text goes out to that lead and says, hi, John, I understand you're needing some help with your matter. They don't get a response in 15 minutes. Another sequence, pre-programmed text goes out and says, look, we've been trying to get a hold of you, whatever. And we start sending some images of the attorney or messages or links to the website. We're trying to engage. So these VAs, when they are set up to do the lead generation and lead management, they're calling, the email and sequence of text is going on continuously to connect to that lead. Even a week later, this is still happening. This continuous sequence usually happens for about 3 weeks until you have basically contacted anybody who was there to be contacted. That was a long answer for a short question. So, but I'm very passionate about the lead generation because it's a lot of money. I have firms who are spending millions of dollars a month on lead generation. And on the other hand, I have solo practitioners who just started their practice. So $10,000 is a huge amount of money for them to spend. So we got to make sure they get their return on their investment. Even doesn't matter if it's a $10,000 a month or $1 million a month, they still got to do the conversion. And the cost of client acquisition, which Mike Morris also pointed out, is a very key important factor because you want to buy dollar bills at $1 or less. You're not want to be, you don't want to pay $3 for a dollar bill. So you need to track that cost of client acquisition at all time and have a weekly report, not monthly, every 2 months, 3 months. By the time you get to it, you possibly had wasted $100,000. And that's when you find out, oops, the money's gone.